they're very different. There's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences. And you really need to know your building codes of Australia and background knowledge.
Hi, I'm Beth Beesky, the founder of More Time to Design and your host of the Design Dialogues podcast. I've been a designer for the last 12 years and I've run my own studio for 5, and I know how hard it is to run a successful business. You not only need to be great at designing, but you need to be great at all the other things as well. I created More Time to Design, a software platform to help designers run efficient studios, and I've created the Design Dialogue podcast to help us all learn together. Each week, we will meet professionals who are at the top of their game doing things that help us run our studios. We'll have conversations with social media managers, interior design mentors, copywriters, stylists, photographers, suppliers, and also designers who have been in the game for a long time and who have such a wealth of knowledge to share. I hope that each week you feel inspired and informed at the end of each of our design dialogues. So join me for the Design Dialogue podcast. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Design Dialogues podcast. And I am joined by the lovely Tameka Moffat from Tameka Moffatt Design. Hi Tameka.
Hi, Beth.
Now, I love to start every episode by finding out, what can you see out your window today?
Oh, look, we're very blessed. We've got a huge big window out the front of the studio here, and it looks up at the Illawarra Escarpment at the Bald Hill Lookout. So it's surrounded by trees and nature, and sometimes we see the paragliders, and it lets a lot of natural light in, so it's a beautiful, beautiful outlook.
Ah, beautiful. That sounds like a very lovely workspace to be in.
It is.
So I would love to hear a little bit about your business. As you just mentioned, you're based down in Wollongong, which is, for people not in Sydney, about an hour's south of Sydney. But yeah, tell us a little bit about your business and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Yeah, well, we're Stanwell Park, so we're just south of Sydney and sort of just north of Wollongong. So we fall sort of in the middle there, which is a great place.
Yeah.
So we've been here for 12 years now. I grew up in Jervis Bay on the south coast, so I lived there for most of my life. I grew up in the industry. My dad was real estate and property development my whole life. So it was spent many, days after school going to his office and looking at all the houses for sale in the window. And on weekends, we used to go and see him do the open houses and conduct the auctions. And so I was always surrounded by building and houses. And I've got 2 older brothers, and they're both builders. Yeah. They work together, and they've been in the industry for sort of 40 years working together. And I'm the youngest. And my husband's an ex-chippy, and his brother's a builder. And we've got 3 sons who are one's an electrician and the other one's an avionics technician. So just grown up in the industry, pretty much lived and slept housing and building. And yeah, it was my whole being growing up.
I can imagine Christmas lunch is just property.
Yep. It's property. And it was interesting with Dad, because Dad only used to have Sundays off because he worked every Saturday, and he worked really, really hard. And that was, back in the day, sounds like the olden days, but it was back in the day when the phone used to ring at home and you had to be very professional, and Dad used to drive the clients around in the cars.
Yeah.
And I used to walk into the houses and walk through them and look at what I'd liked and didn't like. And yeah, so that was really interesting. And then I left school and went to work in an accountant's. And found out pretty quick that wasn't for me. I was indoors crunching numbers, and it just wasn't for me. And then when I was 19, I always wanted to study architecture, and then this job came up with Beechwood Homes when I was 19. Now in my 50s, so that was like 50 years ago. And I got the job at Beechwood Homes, studied interior design, and that was great. It was a large company, and that was, in those days, there was no Revit, there was no AutoCAD, there was no 3D models. It was sketching on paper and the very, very start of computers. So all the plans were developed in 2D. So you had to, and the elevation, so you had to really read a floor plan. and learn to build that model in your mind as a 3D image. So I think that set a really good foundation, learning from that very, very early age and having good people around you and always bouncing off the architects.
Yeah, definitely. I think that skill of being able to manipulate a 2D image in 3D in your mind is an amazing skill that I think, like a lot of things these days, technology kind of has taken over for us a little bit. But I think being able to manipulate that in your mind is such an amazing skill because it's that real kind of, it's a game changer for us in a way, because it's what a lot of people can't do. A lot of people can't see in 3D and they can't appreciate like what they're seeing on 2D on the plan is like, oh, that's not how I thought it was going to look. And so I think that's an amazing skill that I would say maybe a lot of junior designers don't get to flex that muscle as much these days, because we have so much technology available to us at the moment.
Yeah, and it's got a little bit lost, I think, in as you said before. And I think I mean, even these days, when a plan comes through, I'll always view it in 2D first and print the full plan no matter what, and look at the elevations as 2D, because I just need to get my head in the plan. And I think it's really good for spatial planning, and you sort of how you would, work the interiors to complement the exterior architecture. So I think, I mean, these days it's great. I still love to see the 3Ds and develop the 3Ds and, the fly-throughs, and technology today is amazing. But it's been on site and learning from site and learning from a plan and being able to always read a plan, a good skill to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And what made you decide to go out on your own? Was it the fact that every family member was like, come on, you can do it? Or what was that driver?
So I worked at Beechwood Homes for quite a few years, and then we had our first son. And my husband joined the defence, so he joined the army, and that took us to Townsville. We got posted to Townsville, and we sort of didn't see that one coming. And so we got posted to Townsville. We had no family, no friends. It was just up and go. And we'd only been there about 6 months, and he got deployed overseas. So he was gone for 8 months. Straight, no break. He did get he came home for a week in that time. So I was up there with no one. I mean, the defence is such a strong knit community, so we built great friendships there, and we bounced off. All the wives supported each other. But then our oldest son had started school, and then I was pregnant with my second, and I didn't want to put them in care or sort of go back to work because I was the only one at home. So I actually went back and studied hairdressing and beauty. Took my son in the pouch and used to come to the classes. That was when you could back in that day. So studied hair and beauty, and then my husband being in Chippy, we bought our own house, and he built me a studio out the back, and I used to work while the kids were at school and asleep when he was away. And then 10 years later, we came back to Sydney, got posted back to Sydney. By then we'd had our third child, our third boy. Andrew got out of the defence and joined the police force. And he's a police diver in Balmain, so that brought us to Sydney. And then I came back here, and I was just ready. So I went back and upskilled and did my interior design diploma again through over in North Sydney, International School of Colour and Design. And I did a 2-year course, super fast tracked into a 6-month time frame. So,
oh my goodness, with 3 kids. Oh wow.
It was really intense. So I caught the train to North Sydney every day, and I used to drop the kids to school, get on the train, study for the hour before, be in class all day, sit in the quiet carriage and study on the way home, and then stay up really late and do all my assignments. We were producing 3 assignments a week. But it was great because you were just immersed in it, and there was a lot of that had changed in the industry. I was always in the industry anyway, but a lot that had changed. So that was great. And then I finished that and just decided to go out on my own 10 years. And today.
And you do in your studio a mix of residential and commercial work, which for like a small to medium sized business is not unusual, but it's not common, I would say. Like most people tend to specialize in one or the other, because they are quite different, I think. Like I think any residential designer who's attempted to do a commercial project will be like, oh my gosh, there's this whole other language, and it's just very different, and vice versa, I think. What made you decide that you wanted to go down the path of doing both?
I love them both. They're very different, and
Mm,
it's really nice to break them up and have a commercial and a resi sort of like working in parallel with each other. One of our big first commercial jobs was Headlands Hotel that we
yeah,
got at Austria, and that's with we had 61 apartments there and the hotel. So that was a big job, and it was you know, just resi on steroids as far as
yeah,
how many apartments you had to do and whatnot. But I think because I'd always had the building knowledge anyway, it was just making sure it's commercial's a different beast. It
mm,
really is. And depending on the scale of commercial, whether you're doing offices or hospitality or, you know, retail or cafes, or just depending on what you're doing, um, at the end of the day, it's just ensuring that you're really up to date with the building codes of
mm,
Australia and the AS 1428, which is the accessibility codes, and the class of the building and the commercial regulations. I think these days there's a little bit of a blend. I think thinking you can just jump into a commercial and do a friend's cafe or a
yeah,
friend's, you know, hair salon or yoga studio, but there's a lot of regulations that come with it.
yeah,
If especially if it's a new build, opposed to if you're renovating an older building and having to bring that building up to code,
mm,
you know, with stairs and compliance and lifts and turning circles and accessible and ambulant bathrooms and fire rating. So it's huge with the material and finishes selection.
yeah,
Because everything has to be certified, and you work really closely with the certifier and the accessibility consultants
mm.
and the builder. So they're very different. There's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences. And yeah, you really need to know your building codes of Australia and background knowledge.
Yeah. And how do you set up your business? Like, do you have so do you have two separate teams, like a commercial team and a residential team, or do you have all of your designers just it's a mishmash and they're all over everything?
Yeah, a bit of a mishmatch, as you said, and I think it's driven a lot by, and we don't take on every project. At the end of the day, we're very, very, very lucky that, you know, we've built quite a good, strong foundation, and we have a lot of referral based, and so clients a lot of the time they're repeat clients, and we may
Mm,
be doing their home and then doing their office,
yeah.
or we do an office for, you know, a client, you know, 2 or 3 times over.
Yeah.
So it just depends, and it just depends on what we want to take on at the time, what our capacity is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And so how large is your team?
well, there's 3 of us as far as like sort of, yeah, there's 3, and then we've had some freelancers that we, you know, can touch base with if we get really stuck and
Yeah.
we're at full capacity, which has worked great freelancing over the years. We've had quite a few that we've worked with, and it gives them the flexibility too. Some of our freelancers are, you know, they love to work really, really late at night if the kids
Yeah.
are at school, and they can work in their own time. And as long as we're hitting the deadlines and the time frames, you know,
Mm,
that's sort of how we work. But the new bill that's just been passed, I think, is going to come into play a lot with contractors and freelancers.
yeah.
So at the moment, we're actually looking for another senior designer
Yeah.
um, come into the studio, and it's a long-term commitment. We're not going anywhere. We're around for
Yeah. And is that because you feel like with the new regulation, like you have to pay them super, and it's very much more like, because the thing is, a freelancer in, I suppose, the interior design architecture space, it's a regular thing for them. It's not a one-off thing. Generally, it's not a one-off thing. It is a regular thing. And so under the new regulation, they really do look and feel like an employee. So therefore they are an employee. It's very hard to have them as a freelancer. And so is that kind of I suppose the trade-off for you is that you don't have that flexibility, but is it just like, what's been the driver for you to go, okay, we're going to move away from that freelancer model?
Um, Probably more for commitment wise, because sometimes with freelancing it can be a little bit unstable if they take on something else and then that project happens to be bigger than first anticipated or lots of changes. So, and we formed the company going back a few years ago to head this way anyway, and it's a little bit tricky dealing with Sydney, prices at the moment that designers straight out of uni, especially if it's a design and construct company, are on quite a really high wage, which is great. But it's just having that experience and, that site knowledge and being on site. So it's a big shift because there is, full-time employment, casual employment, super loading. There's a lot that comes with it.
Yeah.
You really need to focus a lot more on the business rather than in the business as such. So it's a lot but my husband also helps in the business and we've got a good team. So it's just changing, it's evolving, and it sort of needs to in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot that goes with it, with coming from designers who are used to working in Sydney opposed to in the Illawarra.
Yes.
And just the right fit for the team.
Yeah, it is such a juggle getting that right. Like it's the right person, the right mix, the right location. Like, yeah, it's never as straightforward as you think it's going to be hiring someone.
Constant pivoting. Yeah.
And then in terms of your project load, do you have a sweet spot between I suppose the total number of projects that you're taking on and the mix between residential and commercial?
No, we thought we'd try to at the moment, and it really does depend on, sometimes it's going great and the timelines are fantastic and everything's scheduled in, and then it might take a project to stay in DA a little bit longer than anticipated, which pushes that one out, or one to come out sooner.
Amazing how that change can happen like one day. Like on Monday, you'll feel like we are killing it here. And then by Tuesday afternoon, you're like, I don't know what just happened, but we've totally dropped. Like it just feels like all the balls have been dropped at once. Like it's amazing how fast that can happen.
Yeah, and it is like that. It's literally from day to day. Sometimes it's hour by hour.
Yeah.
And things happen. Life gets in the way. We've all, got marriages and children and health. And so, you may be tracking really well and then something may happen, with a client that, someone may fall sick or they can't get back to you in the deadline that they had sort of, promised they would to provide some feedback, and they need a couple of weeks and that pushes things back. So I think the army set us up so well because we were constantly adjusting. Andrew was here one day, gone the next, constantly pivoting, and you have to be adaptable. You really have to, because you've just got to learn to adapt and pivot, because if you don't, it can really get on top of you. And really lead to burnout really quickly.
And with this kind of you've got both commercial and residential, as you said, I can imagine the speed at which those projects move would be very different, and also what's needed would be very different. What are some of the processes you go through when you have a new inquiry come in? How do you assess whether it's a good or a bad project and whether you can take it on at the right time, at the point where you're at?
Yeah, I mean, in the very early days, you sort of just have to take on what you can and what comes your way to gain the experience and knowledge and whatnot. As I said, we're so blessed. We're sitting in a very good place where, an inquiry will come in and we always conduct a meet and greet. And I always do this free of charge. I don't charge for this because we're gauging the client as much as they're gauging us. And that meet and greet is in the studio where we just sort of get to know each other, and we have a good sit down meeting, have a bit of a discussion about the project. We don't go into the project a lot more than where the project's up to, whether it's a pre-DA or it's going to be a DA or CDC, like compliant development, and just learning about them and their life and who they are and who their children are and how they live their life. And that's because it's a really strong relationship you build with your clients, and you're with them for a long time, and there's a lot of trust that goes into it on both parts. And sometimes it's not a good fit. Sometimes you might meet and there might be something that might just be a little bit off, or the timing might be out, and it's not right for everyone.
Yeah.
And it's knowing, you know, who the architect is and the builder, and just collaborating really well with them from the start to ensure that you've got a really great team.
Yeah.
And everyone's on the same page, and you just want the best for the project and for the client. And because
Yeah.
you know, it's their home, it's not our home.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I always think that's such a turning point in someone's business when they go from I'll just say yes to everything because I need the clients, to actually being able to, one, it's usually because you have said yes to some truly horrific projects and you're like, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah.
But also you kind of have got to the point where you can and put some kind of filter over the projects that you're accepting. I always think that's a really exciting point for people to be in their business. One of the things I'd love to hear from you, and you've kind of touched on it a little bit, I think for new designers, they're always like, where do you get your clients from? Like, where do you find all these projects? Like, how do you get to the good projects? For you, you've been in business for, over a decade now. Where do you find your project coming from? Is it all referral, word of mouth? Where is that pipeline for you?
A lot of it is word of mouth, because we work from sort of North Sydney down the South Coast. So we cover a wide area, and we have worked with, we've done over 60 odd projects in commercial and development, and it's building that strong foundation with the builders and the architects, and as soon as a project comes in, you sort of know who would be the right fit for that job and what level of detail is required. And I think just your building knowledge, you go on site, or when you're meeting a builder for the first time, years and years ago, it was so disconnected, where you had the architect and the builder, and then maybe the interior designer was a luxury item.
Yeah.
It's heading in a much better direction. It's such a collaborative approach, and I like to work with them, everyone prior to DA, so we can give the client a really good feedback as to where their budget's heading. And so a lot of it is referral based and repeat clients. We get, we get messages from Instagram or social media or something like that, but I don't base our platform on having to, that's where our main work is coming from.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, social media is great, but it's a bit of a double-edged sword for me. I don't love it. I love that it showcases people's work and whatnot, but I think if you're not authentic, people see through that pretty quickly. And if you don't have the knowledge.
I think social media, I mean, I think it definitely plays a part. I have such a love-hate relationship with social media, but I think it plays such a part, but not, I don't really think it's a lead generator for interior designers, because my guess is that the clients that you would get through that would not be your ideal client. They're not going to be aligned with you, kind of thing. But I think it's an amazing platform to showcase your work. And I mean, these days, I think so many people don't even go to your website. They just look at your Instagram, and that's really where your portfolio is these days. Like, the days of having quite extensive websites, I think, is almost moving on. Like, everyone's just moving so quick. If they can quickly scroll through your Instagram and see your work, then that's most probably all they need. But yeah, I find that, I think, I know in my like design practice, like builders and architects are such amazing referral partners, and building up that network where they're referring work to you or you're referring work to them. And it is a really lovely spot to get to in your business. And I suppose for new designers, it's just keep chugging away, kind of thing, and make sure that every builder that you work with, invest in that relationship, because you never know what will come of it.
Yeah. And I think just really listening, listening to your client and listening to their brief, and just everyone sort of collaborating so much, because everyone working together as a team plays such a crucial role in the best outcome for that client and that project. And nothing better than a client, wow, I've got such a great team around me, and they're all working together, and you know, we're constantly, you know, working on solutions rather than problems, and how do we fix this rather than, you know, who's made a mistake or who's done this or.
Oh, totally, totally. And I just think like two things that only happened yesterday. I was on site with a builder, and it's a builder I do a fair bit of work for. And we've currently got like two projects in construction and one that we're kind of quoting on. And it was funny. So one of them is really, the budget is really, we're at the end, the budget's tight kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, can you just like check with us before you go to site? Like, you know, because at this point, like I charge an hourly rate for site visits. And I was like, you know what, guys, I hardly need to come to site because the builder can call me, and we've done so many projects together that I can really quickly answer questions. And I was saying to the client, I was like, it's one of the, like, and they were like tossing up between a builder I'd never worked with, I'd never even heard of. And I was like, I'm sure he's fine. But I'm like, please go with my one. Like, please go with my guy. Like, I just knew how much more difficult it would be working with the other builder. I'm sure the project would have been fine. But I just think, I was just like, oh my goodness, like it's so lovely having those working relationships, because it's always a better outcome for the client. It's always a better, like it's easier for you. Like you just, you know, you can pick up the phone and you go, oh gosh, can you do this or can you do that? And like it'll be what could be an hour conversation with someone you haven't worked with can be a 10-minute conversation, which just is so much easier for your business.
Yeah, and I think, you know, everyone plays such an important role. Like the architects structurally, they've got so much going on to get that build, you know, right.
Yeah.
And beautiful and functional, and the builder's concentrating so much on building that. And that's what he wants to do. That's his role. He doesn't want to be bombarded with, you know, what color tap, where should we put in here? What are we doing here? So our plans are so detailed. Our packages are very, very detailed, and everyone works off those packages and plans, and they're very much detailed for building packages. You know, and we're always there on site. We work from concept right through to project completion. So we're always there. So everyone's always calling, and you know, we can answer a question so much quicker because we've done it and we know it. And then the implement, then where everyone's, you know, it's all transparent and everyone's CC'd in, so we're all on the same page and no changes are getting made prior to, you know, not informing everyone. So it's a really good spot where I'm really happy where we sit in the industry currently.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's kind of similar to when you can start putting a filter over your inquiries, like when you kind of feel very confident in that team that you work with regularly, it is kind of a very nice spot to get to in your business.
But new designers starting out, just, you know, you do sort of have to take on what you can, and that may be just friends and family to start with, to experience and just build your confidence. There's nothing worse than jumping into a project and feeling out of your depth, and so it's just a matter of, you know, taking it on and talking to the builders and the architects and being on site and just being a sponge and soak up as much as you can. And I really think I'm at a point where I really want to give back to, you know, new designers coming into the industry and share the knowledge, because if I had someone I could have called, or someone that was able to mentor me, or, you know, give some advice or guidance on what they had done, you know, not necessarily right or wrong, but things they had come across in their career, and I would have loved that. So that's where I'm heading.
And it's I think it's a really nice spot. Like, I mean, I say 13 years, but I feel like I've been saying 13 years for a number of years, so it might be more than that. But like, it was such a secretive industry, and I think there's still some parts of it that are secretive, and they won't share anything. And I think it's a sign of a really an industry that is maturing, in that there is so many more people now who are like, there's plenty of work for everyone. I have no problem sharing what I've done, learn from my mistakes, don't do this, do this. This one worked well for me, kind of thing. So I think that's a really, I think it's a great kind of point to get to as well. And I mean, I just think the biggest thing you can learn is like being on site, like understanding how something is actually built. You'll be such a better designer.
And it's so tricky these days. Like back, you know, you used to be able to just do your job and design, and that was it. Whereas now with social media and everything else that comes into it, there's I don't understand. I'm terrible on Instagram. I'm shocking. I don't have any sort of strategy. I don't have a marketing background. I feel like I'm just, and all this AI and chat GPT,
Oh,
like
yes.
it scares the hell out of me. But at the same time, I know we're heading that way. But I think there's so much to take on instead of just concentrating on what we used to by just designing and doing a really good job at that and being really good at what you did. Now if you don't have a marketing degree or you don't have a marketing team and you're not keeping up with some algorithm, or I do not understand it, and it's really overwhelming for me. But I think people see through, as I said before, they see through all that, and they know that an email has been generated by something that's not authentic. So I'm not in any of that stuff yet. I probably need to, but I haven't touched into it yet.
I think with so much of the technology, though, it's kind of like be inquisitive about it, but not be overwhelmed by it. That's where I try and sit, kind of thing. Like, even looking at, I saw on Instagram the other day, someone they had, like, it was an AI generated 3D render, and I was like, oh man, that is really good, like really, really good. And I'm like, I think that, people talk about, oh, will we be replaced and all that kind of stuff by AI? And I'm like, there's no way. Like, we bring so much value that a computer will never be able to bring. But just like having really good systems and processes in your business, things like AI and, all of that kind of stuff, they can help us increase our productivity, increase what we can do, kind of thing. So I try to have the whole be inquisitive, but I quite often tip over into the overwhelm as well.
It's harder to switch off now these days with Instagram and social media and everything, of feeling like you can just stop for a bit and pause and take some time, and because we need that quiet space. We're busy all day, and then you get into this thing where you're looking at Instagram and trying to compete and keep up. I can't do it because it sends me into an area that I don't like. So
it's definitely something that you kind of go just a little bit at a time.
It's great. I love it. I love it for inspiration, and I think it's fantastic. And I love it as a communication tool for design and people to really support each other and say, hey, great job there, that looks fantastic. How did you go? A lot of the time I find it a bit tricky because there is some certain projects where we may have signed like a non-disclosure statement, so I can't share a lot. And you have some people DM you and say, hey, what did you use here? What did you use there? What was on this kitchen? I want to know the whole colours for the house. And clients engage you to do that for them specifically for theirs. And say, I'm sorry, I can't share that. Or sometimes you get like quite some negative comments, and it's like, hey, just but I think if we just support each other as best we can, we're all in it together. There's enough for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. So what are you looking forward to in your business over the next 12 months?
Just some growth and expansion. I think the project wise, I think we're, I love sort of where we're sitting, and it changes weekly with sort of inquiries and things that come up, which is really exciting. But again, as I touched on before, just being able to give back a little bit and share some knowledge, and that's sort of where I want to head into, an area that people feel they can reach out and give you a call. And but the business itself, I love where we're heading. I think it's changed a lot with like the Class 2 regulations that have come in and all that sort of stuff. So I'm constantly learning. I always love keeping up with our learning and our knowledge, and attending events and seminars and all that stuff with our Design Institute of Australia. And I think if you can be involved in some really good institutions, a lot of them.
Definitely
knowledgeable, and
wow. Oh, it definitely sounds like a watch this space kind of situation for you guys.
We're grandparents now, so I'm also enjoying time with our little granddaughter, because I've got 3 boys and 2 older brothers, so a little girl's come along and she's nearly 1, so we're
oh my goodness, I'm sure she's not spoiled at all.
Not at all.
And how can our community reach out to you and find out more about what you do?
Just it's Tameka Moffat, like we're just a personal brand, and just our website's just Tameka Moffat, and Insta's Tameka Moffat Designs, and we're there. And
wonderful. We will
So we can help in any way, yell out.
Yeah, we will link to all of those in the show notes. Oh, Tameka, thank you so much. I could have chatted for a lot longer. I just think you're such a wealth of information. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks so much, Beth. It's been a pleasure. Love what you do. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this design dialogue. I hope you have found it full of inspiration and helpful information to take into your design studio. If you like the podcast and want to hear more, consider sharing it or writing a review, as it helps us reach more people, and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to unlock the power of effortless studio management and elevate your design business to new heights, please follow the links in our show notes to see how more time to design can help you build a better business. Have a great week, and I will see you for our next design dialogue.